right, from the top, O2 sensors. We got one right here, one right here, and one back down in there. All the plugs look just like this. Here's a little better look where that sensor's at. They're right back in there sitting on top of the trans. Sport the transfer case. 4 13mm nuts, 6 bolts, skid plate off. $18mm socket. Skid plates out of the way. Here's that O2 sensor wire. There's gonna be one more underneath here. Mine's just kind of dangling here. I got 4 bolts on the exhaust. Hanger right here. In my case, my exhaust doesn't run all the way out, so I'm just gonna drop the whole thing down. But there's just a little slip guy right up in there. Those exhaust bolts we're wanting to get to, right up there. There's be 4 of them. They're kind of tight just because the cat's right there. This is the setup. Short socket. I'm doing a big extension. And here's those O2 sensor wires. So we got 1, 2, 3, and 4. Make sure they're clear before you drop the exhaust out. And then what bolts up right here is gonna be the mount that mounts to the skid plate for your transmission. That's this guy right here. Exhaust slips into this tube. There's a little rubber piece that I already pulled out, but I got this out of my way just to make it easier to get the exhaust out of here. All right, exhaust is out. That's where it mounts up in there. The exhaust drops down, comes around, blocks the pan. That's why we got to get it out. But now what we'll do is get the starter bolts undone, get the oil draining, and then get the pan off. All right, oil's all drained. We're gonna get these pan bolts all out of the way. On each of the corners, right there, and in the back, there's gonna be 4 bolts total that are gonna be a thicker thread. Here on the engine, those 2 right on the sides are gonna be a little tricky to get to, just because there's this guy in the way, but it's rubber, so just shove that socket up in there and you'll be good. All right, oil pan is off. This is what we're gonna be seeing here. So I gotta pull my brand new gasket off, and then there's this rail that goes across the bottom. These are all 18mm. They're just nuts. You're gonna take those off, and then this rail will drop out, and then we'll get that rear crank bearing off. Also, I lied. Those are all 15s. All right, this guy is dropped up out of the way. So to get to the rear main, we're gonna be taking the rear crank cap off. And that's gonna be a 21mm socket, 2 bolts. Just make sure you keep the right orientation on that. I mean, it's gonna only go in one way, but. This is gonna be that rear crank cap on these engines. It's a 2-piece rear main. So it's just that piece right there. What I usually do is I'll use a punch just to kind of tap this guy out. They really aren't that rough to get in and out. And then on the crank side, we'll run on over here, all the way back over the Jeep from the parts washer. You can see, it's gonna be easier on this side. You can see that little bit of orange right up in there. It rides right there. Maybe, let's see if we can zoom in there. There we go. That little piece of orange right there, that's the rear main. Use a little punch and just tap that. Just make sure you're not damaging the surface on either side or touching the crank especially. All right, so I gave the other side a couple taps with the hammer. As you can see, that rear main's starting to come out. It literally just spins in and out of that spot. Sometimes it's a little rough when they haven't been done in a while. For the rear main that slides in there, there's gonna be silicone on both sides of the cap right here. Make sure you get that cleaned up, and you'll need silicone. All right, going back together with it, just put the crank cap back up in, just like how it rolled out. You just roll the new one in, lubricate it, and then on both ends of it where they're gonna be touching, just make sure you put a dab of silicone. And then these bolts for the cap get torqued to 80 foot-pounds. All right, going back together, cap's torqued to 80 foot-pounds. You're gonna put silicone up in here on both sides, and then on both parts of the front where it meets the front cover, thread these guys up in here, these little plastic pieces. That'll help retain the gasket, and you'll be able to snap the oil pan up on there. And put this guy up on there and torque it. All right, just so I can show you, there's currently no bolts, but those little plastic guys right there actually hold that pan in place. Alrighty, oil pan is back up in and tight. Just gotta throw the exhaust on, heat shield, plug in the O2 sensors, and fill it up with oil. Pretty straightforward from here. Fill the engine up with 6 quarts at the 1030, and she's good to go.